not do as well on a test as you wanted. But the lifelong sort of relationships that you end up having from university are really a lot more substantive in my view than I think at least I was aware of when I was younger. But I wanted to start off just a little bit about literally what I was thinking about when I was starting university in 2008. Our first assignment for KI was to understand all of the courses in the university, basically. This is what the university site used to look like when you were picking courses. So these are the sorts of ways that you had to go through and find out just what you were able to take and not, and then try to figure out your degree map. So our first assignment was going through and figuring out this degree structure. I don't even know if half these classes still exist anymore. I hope Stats 202 doesn't, but
It
anyway,
does.
so oh yeah, I
It
remember
does.
that midterm. I remember distinctly. I walked into that midterm, and then I had studied so hard for it, and it was the first day of October, and I looked at the first question, and I was like, "Nope," and I walked out and dropped the class or withdrew or whatever it was immediately because I just like this is not happening. So I got my stats requirement done eventually, but that was not the time. So this is what we had to do for our first assignment, and I actually just learned like 2 minutes ago. I actually built buttons into this back then, so good for me. But let me show you a little bit more about what we were thinking about. This is a lot of stuff. Um, wow, they really made us do a lot, Ryan. Kyria. Okay, so this is what I was thinking way back when of how I would approach my degree. And at this point, I think it's fair to say that I had no idea really what I was doing or looking at. And I don't think that's abnormal. As you can also see, too, I really wanted to go and learn French. I really wanted to go to England for some reason. I don't know why. I don't even remember why. And then also figuring out, I thought then I would go through university and then just get a summer job and then leave and all that. Um, this is not even close to how life ended up working out. I mean, by not even close, I mean, it's like, it's not even a mirror. It's more like an obscured sort of like alternate quantum reality. So I think in reality, how this ended up working out was I ended up doing my second year. I ended up not doing so well in stats and physics, and that's when I had to start learning about how to withdraw from courses and that part, and that was not fun. And then I ended up learning my limit really in semester 2 of year 2, and that was when I started to realize as well that I was taking on too much, learning more about scheduling and all that stuff. And then by the time I hit year 3, I think I had a little bit more of a head on my shoulders to be able to understand what was going on, but I started running out of money by this point. So then I had to drop out of university sometime in between here and go make money and then come back. And then my fourth year, I started getting very involved with Fed's politics or WUSA politics. I had a job at the university at the time, and I was getting really annoyed that my projects weren't happening. And I wanted to show you, actually, I found my very first project I ever did for the University of Waterloo. We were testing out, believe it or not, the entire University of Waterloo had a 1 gigabit per second throughput in 2008. And the university was saying that was too much for them because, like, there just wasn't enough like to justify it. So they were looking at upgrading to 2 gigabytes per second. And I was on the project to justify from the housing perspective why that would be important. So this is the first thing I
Stay tuned.
He's frozen for everyone else, right?
Yes, yes, yeah.
oh, I just froze, didn't I?
Yeah, but you're
All
back.
good.
Oh, sorry about
You're
that.
back. You're back. You're back.
Okay. Yeah, so this is my first project I ever did for the university. It's called AutoPing, and what we were trying to prove is that people were using Netflix and YouTube because that really wasn't on anybody's radar. The idea that in academia you would be watching video as well was not really a part of the education idea. So we were trying to come up with an understanding of how to justify for the university what was going on. And so this really ended up teaching me a lot. And I was sharing as well with Shanique before you guys logged on. I got interested in technology by complete accident. I sat literally beside the right person at the right time. And the current provost of students still at Waterloo, Chris Reed, was the one who made me go to business school after hours, in addition to going to regular school as well, while I was at university, to make sure that I was a proper manager for the university. And he always had my back for that. I'm always still immensely grateful to him. And I still am also fortunate enough to be able to still talk to him all that. But this was my very first project, getting into technology. And it's, as you can see, it's not rocket science. It's just literally torrent speeds and HTTP ping speeds. But it got my foot in the door for some more substantive things. And it started changing my interest to other parts of the world. Knowledge integration also made us do a lot of projects as well, which also, for me, I get bored very easily with like the same monotonous kind of stuff. So KI was really helpful for me for that. So this here was a part of our third year museum project. And why I'm showing it to you is not to show you about how concussions are interesting, although I think they are. It's that the variety that I was sort of exposed to was really something I didn't know was helpful for me. And I just giving you more or less a heads up, that could be you, that you might like variety more than you're letting on. But yeah, I didn't really understand that I was interested in something like a concussion until third year university. I didn't think I was a science guy, or I should be looking at sciencey kind of things. So this was a really big turning point for me. So that's just kind of why I decided to show it. But more specifically, Waterloo also really encouraged me to try to talk to people, not to the idea. And why that's important is because when you have really big ideas, most people, A, won't care, and B, don't get what you're talking about. So being able to talk at a human level is extremely important. And you can get away with a lot in university because you're surrounded by extremely smart people who also are in the same sort of wavelength and thinking sort of vein as you. So the language that you pick and all that, you don't have to be as disciplined. However, one of the things that KI also encouraged us to do is make things like posters, where we had the general public come in and then ask us questions like, what the heck are you talking about? Or why should I care about this? So I wanted to show you guys, because this is my first poster that I made. It was after we visited Amsterdam as a cohort in 2010. And I was trying to understand audio guides at that point as well. And again, it's just the variety that I was really exposed to. It really helped to shape how I was able to approach problems. The last one I'll show you is my thesis poster as well. So this one was the biggest, chunkiest one that we all did. So this one is quite dull. So I'm just going to move on from it. I don't know how to, I think my computer just froze. Well, this is awkward. All right. Wait for the program to respond. Thanks, Edge. Okay. Oh my gosh. All
Edge
right.
is a
Well,
great browser.
okay. So it all just closed. Great. Can I restore it? Cool. All right. I saved everything locally as well, so this wouldn't happen, but oh well. Yeah, the next thing I want to show you as well is that I got really involved student-wise. Now, oddly enough, actually, I didn't, boys, I thought you might be coming, but I didn't actually know if you were going to come. So Brian actually took this photo of me in the environment building many years ago. And we had these here were actually tags you could pull off and that to remind you to vote. So, but yeah, I got involved with student politics after a still good friend of mine, Mark LeBlanc, encouraged me to get involved. I think I'm still the only president that has ever run and won on an environmental campaign overtly slate. But yeah, anyways, it was, for me, it was very passionate. And I see Zelda has a hand up. Zelda, yeah, how are you?
Hi, David. Yeah, I'm just curious. So I'm a mature student that came back, who was here before your time and is now back again. I'm just curious, did you have competition when you were running? So like right now, like positions are empty. Like we have WAGs and there's like positions for 12 and like 7 of the spots are filled. I remember in my day, like it was huge to be on student council and you had competition and like your heart raced because you had to be engaged and like you had to make your point and stuff. Was it like that in 2008 or when you were engaged around that time?
It was, and it's interesting that you say that because so I have a unfortunately and sometimes fortunately good memory. So I do remember his name was Hamza Saeed was the name of my opponent here, and then I had another opponent as well named Leia. And Leia dropped out, and then Hamza and I duked it out, as it were, and I beat him by 112 votes. But that's, I think, just my slightly capricious streak coming out. But yeah, I also thrive a lot on competition and on intensity, I suppose. So I think that also was much more, that the political environment was much more suited to that. I'm also not someone who's really been like afraid of stating a position. And I generally as well too don't have views that are manufactured. So that's also been able to play in my favor over my life. So I think that that was a part of it. But the other part of it too was I just really genuinely like listening to people. And like I genuinely just think that people are important irrespective of what's going on. So I mean, all of my friends have made fun of me for this for years, and rightly so. That it's pretty obvious that I have like the political sort of voice and sort of tone and all that other good stuff. But it was a huge honor to represent environment students, mostly because at this point, this was back in the time when things like, climate change versus global warming, that was the discussion, not the idea of like, is carbon good or bad, or the idea of like fluorescence or whatever it was. There was still like a big win coming off of that environmental wise, and like the ozone layer starting to be repaired and all that. So I think there was more of a belief that like action could happen.
Optimism
back
was there.
Yeah, there was a real optimism, and there's things like, we were talking about things like getting rid of plastic water bottles on campus. So even like the I don't know if they're still there, but those like the water dispenser taps, like Kevin Knapp and who was it? It was Kevin and oh man, I forgot his name. Uh Anyways, I'll remember his name soon. But yeah, there are several other ESS presidents that really championed like what I think would be now considered fairly basic things, but back then were like huge deals. So
Do you have any takeaways of how we might be able to, I might be taking us off track, but any insights on how we might be able to solicit more students to get engaged in this aspect? I don't know if students have, like, there's more students that are in co-op, and so their like attention's being pulled in different directions and priorities. But yeah, across the board, ESS, all the societies, all of them, and even feds or like WUSA, again, their roles, like there's empty positions there. I think a piece of it's like communication. They're not getting the information out because social media is just like a fire hose now. But yeah, just wonder if you had any thoughts around that kind of student engagement piece.
yeah, it was. So I mean, tactically, how we approached that was I have two friends, Devin and Will. They ended up creating a bot to scrape all of the classes and create an optimization algorithm to see what classes I should visit at what time to optimize the amount of people I saw. So we were using fairly advanced analytics, I suppose, in hindsight, from the get-go. So I think it was called Quest was the name of the system. Yeah. So but also this was back when as well, like data scraping was quite new. So I shouldn't say new, but like the ability to be able to do it locally on your own computer was still quite novel. So we had a distinct advantage over our opponents then. So we started doing that for my second environmental counselor campaign. And then when I ran for president, I wasn't really gunning to be the president at any point. It more came about because I was an environmental counselor, and there was my opponent and I had very, very different philosophies of how the world should treat other people and how things should be conducted. And we sat down at Starbucks at University in King on December the 29th, 2012. And I told him, look, like, you can't keep doing XYZ activities or else I will run against you and beat you. And he said, bring it on. So that's how I started running for Fed's president. And yeah. I ran against Jesse McGinnis and Mo Badir, also known as Mo Bama. And Mo Bama was an incredible opponent to have, and also just a wonderful person. And yeah, it was intense. I think we had the most like votes for at least a decade. I know at least beforehand. I'm not sure thereafter, but I think Jesse and I we had a really big like. We were two fairly like well-known people on campus, and it was a pretty cool. I don't know, election. I think it was fun. And then the year after, one of my big goals when I was in office was to increase engagement, irrespective of who people were voting for. And there was a lot of people that just didn't care, and I thought that was weird that you're spending all this money and you have no idea or say of what's happening. So, but I think in hindsight, I was also in I was in the pre-Trump bubble as well. So like politics was not like nearly as like polarizing and polluted as then. Like nobody would have identified me as like a conservative or a liberal or an NDP or something like that. It just wasn't really that kind of cut. And even running on an environmental campaign wasn't immediately considered like socialist or anti-capitalist or anything. Like I was still able to sit down and have reasonable discussions with the board of governors. And then, I mean, we have a sustainability office still at Waterloo after that. So it obviously worked, but like we didn't have the same kind of thing as polarizing attitudes. Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, I also don't use social media, which also kind of helps. Never really have. So I kind of had to get a lot of advice on how to use social media, and that probably also helped. One of the places I ended up running was the National Gallery of Canada, and yeah, like here it was really interesting just because like taking those same problems and of like, for example, when I first came on, I was brought on as chief of staff and chair of the management committee. And so there were three things to solve here. First was they had a $1.5 million operating deficit, which equated to approximately 5% of their total operating budget. The second problem that they had was they had a 75% rate of employees that wanted to leave immediately. They hated being at work and they didn't want to work. And then finally, as well, the attendance had dropped by about 10% year over year for the last 5 years. So each of those problems had to be individually segmented. And obviously art, in my view, and I think that there would be very few people who would argue this, is fairly political. And at the time, we were organizing what is still the world's largest assemblage of global indigenous art ever, in a show called Abadakane. And even then, like stick handling the politics around that, the lessons I learned from Feds and from being in ESS were still intact. Like, you know, there was a lot of diplomacy, there was a lot of like deal making, compromises. But I don't even think you can do that now. I think that the wall is a bit too firm even now. So again, just more of an observation when I actually got it, because this job was specifically reporting to the Prime Minister's office. So like it's one of those things too where like the politics should have interfered more than I expected. Now, the place that did have a lot more political interference than I thought working on a project was EDC. Export Development Canada. So we built out their trade insights platform and processes as well. So I was the one who led that team, and that project was quite interesting as well. But now I'm jumping ahead of myself. Did I answer your question, Zelda? This is my other little fun poster as well from the same time. So going up against Hamza. This one here I wanted to show you guys quickly as well. This is my thesis from my fourth year. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because it took me an extra 18 months to complete it. And that was, it really broke a relationship between myself and the thesis advisor because I was so poor at communicating all the stuff that I was going through. And I'm not the sort of person that regrets stuff unless like unless there's a good reason for me to reasonably not have known. Like for example, if I'm being rude to somebody and I should have known better, I'm going to kick myself for that. But at this point in my life, I didn't really understand how to talk to people and communicate to them correctly my mental health, like where I was at in terms of a project status, what I really cared about when I stopped caring about things. So the reason I'm bringing up my thesis is that, so I started off by wanting to develop a quantitative metric of understanding identity. I became very interested in identity after reading a lot of books, and I thought this was an important question. I totally over-vectored on the project and did like way more than needed. And these things happen. But I think, again, the big lesson, though, I really did learn was that when I was over vectoring, I wasn't listening to other people who were saying, stop, like you have done enough. I was trying to be as ambitious as humanly possible because I was scared that if I wasn't ambitious, I wasn't going to go anywhere. So I think that when you look at like this kind of project overall, I would just encourage you as well, just to remember as well, like people will be giving you advice that you might not get in the moment, but sometimes you do have to trust people as well. Thanks, Kyria. It's a hard. It's because I'm still learning this lesson as well. Like especially since COVID, my energy levels have been totally out of sync from what they were beforehand. So, but yeah, just this was a hard lesson to learn. And also unfortunately had a consequence of a lost relationship. But I think that, again, the lesson from it too was learning how to properly communicate to people where I was at, but also as well, I tried to be as ambitious as possible, and I achieved that, but it was at a cost. And sometimes that's not necessarily worth it. So I wanted to bring this up just as a little lesson. This here is my first year schedule. And I just wanted to show to you guys just how similar everything really is. Funny story with Michelle Ashburner. I was playing hockey, intramural hockey, about 3 years after this, and I was on a breakaway. The goalie came out to poke check me. I jumped up and I knocked the goalie in the head, knocked the goalie out cold, and scored. Looked back. They took off the helmet. It was Michelle. And she looks up at me and she's like, you. Anyways, but these things happen. To give you context as well, this class here with Robert Porter was his last term. So when I started university, you still had the option of submitting your final essays written by hand. And he had a secretary that you had to make office hours with and call beforehand. But yeah, that was it. It feels like forever ago. But anyways, Math 127 was my very first class. My first ever exam, I scored a whooping 11%, including a 1 point for my name. And that taught me that I had to study and actually take university seriously. So just more or less heads up. If you guys have been in that situation before of like, whoa, university, like this is very different, I feel you. I really do. It was a huge embarrassment. So these things happen though, but obviously try to avoid that. Like don't go trying to get 11% on an exam, but that did happen to me at least, and it was a huge wake up call. So that's kind of why I wanted to show you this. The other one too I wanted to show you is CS115. This is my first experience dropping a course when I realized I just simply, my brain does not work this way. It was horrible and very embarrassing. I thought I could do anything coming from high school because I was always doing fine in all my courses. And then once I hit CS and actually was, confronted with this kind of methodology and failing constantly, having to confront that was very hard. The irony, of course, that I do nothing but data science all day now doesn't escape me at all. But and I have also contacted JP Preddy, who was the instructor who I stayed in touch with, and I promised him, I was like, I will finish a computer science course, and I did eventually. But yeah, this is, I think, just a few lessons that I've learned from there. The other one too, the best class I definitely took in terms of helping how I approached a lot of things was SpeechComm. SpeechComm 223 was a really helpful class. I have a fairly memorable speech somewhere on my hard drive, or if it's not on mine, at least on Ryan's, of me rollerblading up and talking to people, teaching them how to rollerblade while on rollerblades. I think just a lot of it is just going the extra mile, and that I think that's what I've always been told has been unique about how I approach things. But I think more specifically here, I think really just I learned how to accept failure here, and that I'm not the best at everything. And then as well too, I mean, Integ 120, if you haven't taken it, I mean, it literally changed my life. I wouldn't be the guy I am without it. I found my notes the other, I think, 5 or 6 months ago, and like I almost teared up. Just I learned about the word interdisciplinary, for example, on September the 15th, 2008. Like it's all written in my notes. So yeah, I think keeping notes is really special and good as well. The next quick thing I wanted to show you guys was resumes. So this here was, whoop. Oh no, I'm sorry. I thought I brought. Okay. This was the. This is what my current resume looks like, and I'm so sorry. I had brought up. Let me just. Make sure. Okay. Sorry, I had my old resume brought up, but this is what my current resume looks like. And the reason I'm showing it to you is just because I found that over my career, the types of resumes that I have changed drastically. And that's why I wanted to show you what the progression of resumes kind of looks like. So if you guys can give me like 10 seconds, I'll just pull up the other document. It's just on my other screen. So 1 second. Stop sharing screen. Okay. And in the meantime, if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I have so many questions, but I'm like happy for people to like drop other questions in the chat. I'm just flabbergasted at the kind of individual you are. Just the thing that's stuck in my head is you gotta stop treating people the way you treat people, man. If not, I'm gonna run against you and win.
No,
My bad.
You have to be unfailingly nice to people, even if the thing is that you also don't need to be nice to everybody. You need to be but you need to be nice to almost everybody, because there are people who are not worth being nice to. They're not being nice to other people. And sometimes you have to stick up for those people and take a stand and not be as nice. But my general view is that if you spot other people being indecent to other people, you should do something about it. And I'm in America right now, so I sort of put a little bit of a cap on that for a few reasons. Yeah, it's one of those things, though. I think it's a lot more important than I really thought. So okay, 1 sec. I just got that resume. Okay, so this is the Deloitte resume I got. There we go. And open. Okay, so this is the resume I used to get into Deloitte. And at this point in my career, I really didn't know how to talk about myself or how to define myself or any of that good stuff. Um, so I was using a lot of phrases like leader, like trying to come up with phrasing like this. Um, I was trying to use a lot more of like action verbs, things like, elected, and trying to talk about design thinking. But the other thing too is that I don't want all of you guys to walk away thinking this is the right way to get into Deloitte, because I now know how many different sort of like bots and all that stuff are being used. So I don't want you to think that this is the way. But I would also be lying if I didn't say this is the resume I used. So it was one page. It had a specific section on what gave me energy, and I was told that that was really helpful for understanding what types of work environments would do best. And this is also when I was trying to position myself as a continuation of a leader from Feds. And I wouldn't say that was a mistake. I think it was naive to try to do that in Canada. I think in different markets you could have done that, but Canada that's just not how it works. There's a hierarchy of systems that you have to go through first, or unless you go out on your own to do a startup. So I think that in hindsight, that's really the only thing I would have changed. You'll also notice here that I don't have anything about my grades or anything, and that's because my grades were not good enough for me to try to highlight really. Uh, and yeah, in hindsight, these things happen, but also I think I would have learned better study habits at school, and I would have emphasized that more in hindsight. One of the big pieces I would love for you guys to walk away with today, and it's a saying that I've said to every student that's asked me a question, is it's never too late to stop bad habits. And if you have a bad habit and you know it's a bad habit, like you don't study well, or you don't think, you think you're stupid, or that you're rude to people or whatever. Like if you know it's a bad habit, get on it now. It's not going to get any better. So just a small bit of encouragement there. And Shaniqua, I see your hand.
Yeah, I had a question about because you had mentioned that the only thing you would change is your president and CEO of Federation of Students bullet point. In what way would you have changed it? And if you could like speak a bit more as to why, because you had just talked about how in different markets, like you could do that or not. But yeah, just curious about that.
I think what I would have done for the Canadian market specifically here is I would have highlighted the more specific projects that I had done and what was accomplished as a result. So as you can see here, this talks a lot. If you're talking from a political level, this makes sense. If you're talking from a business level, this doesn't mean anything, because it doesn't actually tell you what the person is capable of. It just tells you that the person has done something. So I would have quantified it a little bit more, and I would have made it a little bit more specific to the types of projects. However, if I was in States where I am now, what I would have done instead is I would have massaged that to demonstrate the opportunity that I wanted, as opposed to what I had done. So this here isn't positioning me for anything specific. It's just saying I did something. So
Right.
again, tailoring it so it demonstrates the opportunity that I am going for with that business. That's how I would have now positioned it.
Okay. No, that's awesome. And I had another question, but I know you have to go through all the resumes, but you also talked about the bots that people are now using to screen through. I think that's a thing that a lot of students are curious about, like how do they position their resume so that it gets past the bots to the front of the person that actually that they want to see it. Yeah.
And I'll admit that I never got past these bots. Like I had a really difficult time as soon as I joined Deloitte in 2015. I knew it wasn't the right place for me to work, and I immediately started applying to jobs outside of it. And I never got a role until I ended up leaving to start my own firm in 2021. And it was very difficult to try to position myself away from it, but also to find a working environment that I thought was really going to be comparable in terms of the amount of types of work you can do. The other thing I can say also too is that While I would never ever recommend anyone working at Deloitte Canada, Deloitte Global and Deloitte New Zealand and the other practices are absolutely wonderful. The Deloitte Canada folks, I again have nothing but negative things to say about. But again, from a Deloitte Global perspective, if you can get a job there, the work is literally it's a lot. It is as much as you have read about and more. You don't see your friends for years. You don't really have family. You don't do anything. You just fly around the world and work. And the benefit at the end of it is if you make it, you get a small little pay bump basically and a lot of prestige. And so the pay is not really what you should be looking at here. It's once you do have enough years at Deloitte, you can literally walk into any room and tell somebody, hi, I've done this, and they'll listen to you. It's as simple as that.
What
So
kind of what kind of training did you go through at, like, presumably there were skills there that perhaps maybe have taken you forward in your career?
yeah, so one second, I'm just gonna
I
my
was gonna
staff
say,
members
was that deliberate?
my
No,
staff
okay.
members in now. So yeah, so this was the very first deal that I worked on with Deloitte. So it was my first certification I got from was called post-merger data migration. So basically, when TD Bank purchased a bunch of debt from this other company, MBNA, making sure that the technical systems and all the data were synced up together, that was my first post-merger job. So in order to do anything at Deloitte as a front-facing consultant, which is what I was going for, so there's several different types of consultants. There's back-end ones that you don't see clients. There's ones that you do deal with clients. And then there's ones that you do both the work and then dealing with clients as well. So that's the most ambitious one. That's one you get paid the most for. So that's what I picked. And yeah, so the certifications that you end up getting every year, you do a minimum of 80 hours of training in addition to all of the other work you do. So 80 hours, as you know, is about 2 working weeks. So usually if you have downtime, I don't know, so like a typical week would be you fly out Monday morning about 6 or 7 a.m. and then you land at your client site 8 or 9, or if you have a later flight or you fly on Sunday evening, you're usually at the client site doing meetings by 10. You work until about 4, get to the hotel, check in, go back to the client site, finish off your stuff for the day, get back to your hotel room, do work, and then kind of do that all over again until your fly out day, which is on Thursday or Friday. And so when you find time on the plane or, watching TV in the hotel room or something like that, then you'll be doing your certifications. So you try to keep your eye on what's next. So the next ones that I did were, I think I did blockchain next. Yeah, so that was back when the Deloitte was building up a blockchain practice with this guy, Matt Spoke and Ian Lee. And so I got my blockchain certification. So for that one, what you end up doing is they have internal certifications, and then you have to get like on a project, and then there's some other thing you have to, I can't remember now. But there's like every year you're in at least 2 weeks of training, and then you also do on top of that, if you get promoted, something called like there's analyst school, then consultant school, senior consultant school, manager school, senior manager school, partner school. So every year you're in school that you get promoted as well. So it's you're always learning if you're not on a client site. And you're also writing constantly as well. So like writing positioning papers. I was on the global team for chatbots, for example, back when IBM Watson ended up allowing us to demonstrate enterprise ways of using it. So like that's how I got involved with AI stuff. But yeah, so that was the guy named Bruce Lacco was our head of learning for Deloitte, and I ended up running into him in the hallway actually and was making fun of him because he had this little smoothie pouch that I said looked like space food. And it turns out I should have been on a call where he was actually supposed to be presenting, and it was very awkward. But anyways, these are just more moments of things working out accidentally. Then I got my certifications in Agile as well, which I would recommend at some point, just because it helps you understand how to iterate when something doesn't go your way. And the final thing as well that I did was a full M&A or mergers and acquisitions, because there's different subsets when you have really big deals. There's different areas that you have to be good at. It's not just like business one, business two, they get married and everybody's happy. It's a little bit more complicated than that. So then I got another certification in that. So yeah.
What about project management? Did that play a role, or did you do like PMP or any of that, or recommendations?
I chose not to, because when I was at Waterloo, I did OHD. Is that what? Yeah, OHDs. So when I was 19 until I was 22, yeah, I did 1 or 2 courses every, I don't know, like term, I guess it was. Like I was on the actually.
What's the OHD acronym? I saw it some.
So it was Organizational Human Development at Waterloo, and yeah, actually it was funny. I was actually just rereading. So there's a lot of books. So this one is called How to Delegate Effectively. I've been having a few problems with just how I delegate things and relearning how to do that. But yeah, I went to, that's where I learned all my project management skills and all that, was at OHD. Chris Reed. So it was because I was so young when I first joined Waterloo as a manager. Chris Reed made me go to night school, because he's like, I'm not letting you be a manager of people if you have no idea what you're doing. You're 19 years old. Like, are you kidding? So yeah, he made me go to school at night. But yeah, that guy, yeah, undoubtedly helped me get through school. There's no way I would have been to school without him.
To that end too, so I think kind of sort of for the first time in history in the workforce, we have like 5 generations of workforce. So we have teenagers in the workforce, and we still have 70-year-olds in the workforce that all have very different ways to delegate to. Do you have any? This was just something I just came across too, like going back to the workforce, and I'm on the other end of that spectrum, so I'm intrigued too. I think it's something we take for granted. Changes.
Yeah, I'll show you something very quick. So we've just moved to Todoist as our full platform in CRM. And this is in direct response to the fact that my staff members, basically I have 2 of them that are under 25, and I noticed that they literally had never logged into their Microsoft accounts. They were always using Canva, and they were using our other like internal AI tool that I've built, and that's it. So I was like, okay, well, this is my biggest expense. If nobody's using it and I'm the only one using it, then I have to change. So for me, it's more, I see myself as more flexible to all the other people doing work, as opposed to like wanting to lead on it, because I have a big enough and bombastic enough personality that I know that if I say something, then it's gonna go. So that's why I try to like basically shut up and let other people tell me what they think is better for this. And this has taken a few months to get to this point. Not months, actually. This has taken about this started in December, so this is 9 months getting here. But yeah, for me, it's just I try to let other people tell me what foot to take, because I know I'll always be off to the races otherwise. Todoist, yeah, thank you for posting that. Yeah, and but the other thing too is that most people, I think, are aware but don't fully appreciate the fact that most software that you use on average changes about every 18 months now, I think it is. And that's at like an average level. So people who are younger and are like, really interfacing with tech constantly are having even shorter cycles. So again, that's why my mentality has always been like, lead by like, this is the outcome I want. And if you dare try to move from this outcome, so help you God. But also, how about we get there together? So that's kind of how I ended up creating that box as well, just because I like to set a ceiling for people, because I know most people don't want to reach for the stars always, because that's exhausting. So if you set the ceiling and people know when they're there, you oftentimes get better results from people than just saying like, we're always going to do the best and everything's going to be amazing and all this stuff. Like, nobody cares or believes you. And also, you don't eat when you are selling to clients like that. You have to sell in terms of boxes. So yeah, that definitely is a big lesson. The other part I'll start to very briefly mention too is I've stopped being on boards. I have a firm now no boards rule because I have found boards to be extremely useless and also a huge emotional time suck, primarily
Ouch.
because I've always been the youngest and almost always the only person that looks like me in these rooms, and I just get tokenized constantly. So I would, and this has been more constant after I moved to Toronto as well. It's been a lot less like this since I've moved away. But yeah, I had a very odd relationship with boards. So just as more or less a heads up, if you are joining a board, the number one thing I would advise you is the first question you should always ask is make sure that you have board insurance. Make sure that they have you covered, because if not, you can get in a lot of trouble. So again, always ask, do you have board insurance? If they say no, say, what is your plan to get it? And if they don't have a plan, don't serve on that board. And I'm not kidding. Like, you can get in some serious trouble because that is the accountability level of the organization. So again, just heads up. The other piece as well that I've also started to learn more about is on speaking engagements. It is really important to keep your speaking engagements because people seem to like them. I don't really like to look back at my own writing. I find it kind of navel gazing-ish. And it makes me ill looking at myself on camera and like reading my own stuff. But again, other people like it. So definitely keep your stuff and try to write it beforehand as well, because it makes things like writing a book really easy because you've already have all this stuff written down and you just need to rephrase it. So for example, like I'm writing a book now on or I've written a book, I guess, on called Case Studies in Innovation about stuff here in Mississippi and how it's going to be impacted by AI. But I've been using all of my talks here to write it. And so I have another, like, I don't know, 8 other talks since January to add to here. So it just sort of easily compounds into something. So, and you just have more material to work with. But yeah, if you want to know how I've been like getting away with writing and adding that to it, I'd literally just write down whenever I go and do a speaking engagement, what I'm going to do. Even like, for example, on my other screen, I have my notes of what I'm talking to you guys about today. Like I have the 3 things that I need you guys to take away from this. Like but anyways, if you get in that practice, it just makes your life a lot easier. And then finally as well, even though I didn't do very well in school, I've been very blessed to make a recovery, shall we say. And I did quite well in my master's as well. And I was blessed to be a fellow of the University of Toronto in the Monk School of Global Affairs. But I really learned, I didn't take that as like I suck at school. I took that instead as the learning methods that the teachers I was working with, they just didn't click for me. So I've been very fortunate to be able to give guest lectures. And so what I've tried to do is try to tailor it towards the student that I wish, or the type of teacher I wish I had. So I have a lot of interactive elements. I have a lot of 3D elements. I try to introduce things from first principles instead. So like, for example, with Roman art, I like to introduce it from like, what materials are they using? Why would they have picked that material? Where is the material from? How would they have mined it? How would it have got there? How would they have finished it? What were the paints looking like? Where did the paint come from? So much more of a primary source way of looking at it is something that I have found personally enticing. But the reason I'm telling you this again is that you might not be perfect and great at something now, but that doesn't mean you suck. It just means you have an opportunity to learn and also to help other people along the way, to learn better as well. And again, just because you're not getting that experience right now doesn't mean it doesn't exist. You just have to will it into existence a lot of the time. What else is here as well? So here are some of the internal papers I wrote for the firm. Oh my gosh, these are boring. Yeah, like benefits of optimization modeling across shared services. So that was basically this thing here. Chatbots and analysis. Oh, so this here was interesting. So this was my first big project in terms of leading it. And Ryan and Kyria both know, so this was called the 24/7 delivery project. So we had teams in Chile, the US, Portugal, Poland, the Philippines, Hyderabad, New Zealand, and then onshore in Canada to build this. Oh, and then in France as well. So I was the head of testing for this, and it was a huge responsibility, and learning how to manage across time zones, and how to get sleep. I didn't learn that, I would say here. I definitely was exposed to the fact that I don't know that here. I wouldn't say I came up with any helpful hints or anything. So this is about a year and a half of my life of like basically every day, 24/7, you're on. And yeah, after this, I didn't have a burnout after this. I ended up snapping at my boss just because I had some deaths in the family. And then basically I thought they were being quite rude to me. I think that this is where I really learned as well, the idea of find your tribe. Like if things aren't clicking with people on your team, and people don't respect basic things, like, for example, like my godfather / great uncle had died, and then before that my great uncle had passed away, and like the firm was like, yeah, but you got to work weekends. And so I was like, no, like a family member just died and I'm spending time with my family instead. And so it's stuff like that where, would I have gone back and like maybe been a little bit more calm and diplomatic? Probably. But also I think I really learned in hindsight here, just like when you're in a really important role, not to let that role become you. You end up taking it on just for your first, like, really important thing. You're really responsible for, in this case, I had like 80 or 90 people under my my team. It was, really high visibility work. It was a $250 million project. So it was a lot of visibility. Yeah, I mean, it was done. It was the first end-to-end digital insurance product in Canada, and I'm very proud of it, and I'm proud of the team too. But also the lessons learned for it definitely were, yeah, not letting that become my identity specifically, and not letting it. There was a few important moments too that I missed in this time. I don't regret that necessarily. I think, too young to understand they were important moments. But yeah, it's moments like that too, where in hindsight you're like, well, there's no reasonable reason I should have known that, because I didn't know anybody who had been, in this position before. So that's also why I like to emphasize, like, university is really a time for getting to know people, and getting to like have that social education. So it's again, I think it's really important to note that. And perfect. Yeah, so the last couple of things I want to show you guys are, this is another project too that I did after Sonnet. So the team I ended up leading here, we built the full the end-to-end solution for getting a mortgage online for CIBC. And so this was a fairly complicated project, primarily because I learned here a lot about handling a client. Basically, there were two clients that were trying to become, trying to get a promotion up in the bank, and both of them had this project intersecting in their portfolio. And like literally, like they would be in rooms screaming at each other, with like their like teams of like 10 people behind them, just like having at it. It was absolutely wild. But I learned here how to manage clients, and specifically how to manage up. And if you haven't heard of that phrase before, the idea of managing up is making sure that the flow of work that is coming between yourself and the people that you're working with, whether it's a boss, a client, even stakeholders or citizens or whatever, it's about like figuring out how do you communicate consistently and effectively with that. And then when stuff isn't going well, how do you make sure that you have a consistent path to resolution? basically, one of the big lessons I learned here as well was from Connor Malak, who also went to Waterloo and was the head cheese on this project from the Deloitte end. But he used to always say, if you're going back to a contract, it means something's gone wrong. It shows you how important contracts are. So basically, you come up with a contract during times when things are good, and making sure that everything stays good is not actually in your best interest. It's actually in your best interest instead to have a plan for when something goes wrong, instead of pretending that everything will always go well. So this is where I learned that lesson of managing clients, and like both sides were just so at the teeth, and we still had to get it done. And we had a pretty tiny budget for this one as well, so it was quite tricky. But yeah, that was the lesson I learned here. The next big client I had then too was EDC, Export Development Canada. So this is when I got my first signed client, and that was an amazing opportunity. Yeah, the brief that we had was that their communications team was not really keeping up with the speed by which Trump was coming up with insane policies. So they had to change the method by which they were providing export advice towards people. So that was problem one. And then problem two was the amount of time it took for folks to get export insurance was about 6 months. So using the same lessons that we learned from Sonnet, we then applied them here. So we got it down from 6 months to 5 minutes. So that's what got me in the door to then this part here, making trade insights, which was then their ability to figure out how to best respond to the different kinds of insanities, again, that were coming from the States back in 2017-18. So big lessons I learned here, first and foremost, was treating clients with kindness. I went in really hot-headed here and wanting to go and change everything because it was so demonstrably bad. And that was not the right approach. So literally what happened was I would get up there and the whole team during our stand-ups, they would literally physically turn their backs to me. And I would just be speaking to a whole bunch of people who are 40, 50-year-old people who just didn't want a consultant then. So that it just demonstrates to you again, it was not the most effective way to go about getting people on your side. And I think the real way that we were able to turn around that relationship was by me really changing how I approached people and how I listened to people, but more specifically demonstrating to people that when I listened, I also followed up. And so this is really, I think, where I learned about that follow-up, that action, and making sure when you say something, you really follow through and keep doing it. I definitely feel like this was a big opportunity to learn that. And then I see it, we're at 10:13, so I'm going to motor on here very quickly. The National Gallery, the biggest lesson I learned here was, I learned a lot of things here, but the biggest lesson I definitely learned here was that if you smell something rotten, get out immediately. There's no reason that your reputation should be tied to nonsense just because somebody else is being ridiculous. So yeah, basically here it was the CEO that I was reporting to just disappeared. So I ended up being the CEO of the place, and so we had about 350 full-time staff and another 300-ish part-time staff. And I had mentioned the challenges earlier here. So we had an operating deficit, nobody showing up, and the staff didn't like being there. So all of the lessons I was showing you guys earlier about, learning how to follow up from people, learning how to really deal with competing and warring factions almost internally, and then also not letting the identity of the project subsume me. I definitely learned these lessons here, but I was still learning here as well. And it was a huge honor, obviously, though, to serve for Canada, and especially in this capacity. The last thing I'll note is that my major client now is Innovate Mississippi. So my job here is making sure that anybody who's an entrepreneur in Mississippi has the tools they need to succeed. But I'm also as well the chair of the AI collaborative as well. So our goal is to make sure that Mississippians have unlimited access to generative AI. So we're building that up as well. But again, it's really in line, as you can see too, with this is just kind of the same kind of path as, you know, even the beginning of, even though I didn't expect to take this very specific path that I had mapped out way back in October of 2008, it doesn't mean that things won't necessarily work out. So yeah, that's a bit of the spiel I have, and I'm sorry I went a bit over. But yeah, this is that's sort of my my story.
This has been so incredible. I can't even. David, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm actually so mind blown because of the time. I know that some people may have to hop off, and that's totally okay if you do. We may have time for only one question, I'm afraid. So if anyone has a question between Winnie and Chris and Ayush, like feel free to ask Rye if you have a question. I also want to be respectful of David's time because I know we said we end up at 11, but if anyone has a question, feel free to let us know. I was literally just about to say, otherwise, David, where can we find you? How can people get in contact with you? You're so good.
Yeah,
You're like, here's my
yeah.
email.
Yeah,
Amazing.
this
Okay.
is that's it. Yeah, I don't have social media or anything. Like I have
No.
LinkedIn, but somebody manages that for me, and then so it's yeah, the best way is just email. So yeah, I'm just really bad with the comms.
No, it's all good. And thank you for giving us the heads up. So, folks, if you email David, give him 72 business days to respond. Thank you very much. And from someone who sucks at texting in general to another very obviously busy professional, I totally get it. Oh, there's a quick question. Quick question. How did
Yeah,
you
no
end up
worries.
working with Innovate Mississippi?
Um, long story short, I applied to a lot of stuff in Canada. So my wife is the art history professor here at Jackson State University. And so we moved down here to Jackson, Mississippi for her job. And we always knew in academia we would have to move. So I designed my career to be to like
Flexible,
jump
yeah,
off
to
my
do
own so I
that.
could follow her.
Yeah.
And so honestly, how I got this, and I have a nice client roster down here now, is I literally walked up and down the roads of Jackson, Mississippi and opened doors and gave my resume out to people and said, I'm David Collins. I will do anything for you. And then I
There
ended
you
up with
go.
a client roster. And so now I advise basically every business on the road, all the banks, all the lawyers, everybody comes to me for business advice now. So, but yeah, I literally just walked. I don't think that's normal. I don't think that's how things work anymore. But I mean, I literally did that late 2022. I'd applied to about 600 different opportunities up in Canada, and I just wasn't hearing anything back. And so I thought, hey, let's try this. Can't I like? There's nothing else I can do about this. So yeah, that's how I got that started, and then the first year of Red Beans, basically, we had no clients. We had really like piddly kind of things, and I was self-funding it, but I knew that was going to happen. And then by the second year, we started getting a couple of clients, and then by the third year is when we landed Innovate Mississippi as well as another client, the Nonprofit Alliance. And so we've just been expanding from there. Yeah, so this past, I don't know, like a month ago was the first time I haven't had to like self-finance the business for a monthly payroll. So like it's kind of like just off the ground. And yeah, it feels really exciting because we've just hit profitability. So yeah. But yeah, I literally walked up and down. It's hard work, but yes, it is. And the thing is honestly, the one piece of advice I'd tell you is the best way to do business and be in business is be in business. Like just open a business now, like, and just get started. Because there's no right time. Now and yeah, there's no right time, and you're just going to be learning more and more. But again, business opportunities, they only come up when you're in business. So just start a business. Even if it's just an LLC, whatever it is. but yeah, just the best way to be in business, just be in business.
I didn't realize that my microphone was open. I was laughing. Thank you.
No, no worries. Yeah.
Hello. Okay. Yeah, I think you guys can
Oh
hear
yeah.
me.
No.
Yeah.
I hope this is helpful though too. I really don't want to. I know obviously it's 10:20 my time, 11:20 your time, but yeah, just want to be as useful as possible to you guys. No problem, Chris.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Like I'm just finishing off my master's degree now at the Waterloo, and then just hearing how you adapted to everything, and just I think like the way you adapted to everything was the my biggest takeaway. Thank you very
That's
much.
very nice.
Yeah.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, and congratulations too on the masters as well.
Almost done, not there yet, but almost.
I understand.
Thank you.
I'm using
No
an
problem,
external
Ayush.
camera and I just realized that my camera was like off. I hope it wasn't off the entire time because I could see
No,
myself, but
it
No,
wasn't.
it
No.
wasn't.
okay, cool. Great. I'm like, oh. All right. So, Winnie, thank you for that question. And David, it's funny what you said. That's my dad's a businessman. He's in business and he says it all the time. Like, to build a business, you have to be in business. And so you just start a business. Anyhow, this was amazing. Thank you guys so much. The recording will be made available on our website. David, you are such a gem. You guys know where to find him. It's his email. We will also make that available on the website as well for you guys to make reference to. You can add him on LinkedIn, but he doesn't manage it. So there, no, we know that. Thank you guys so much. Please enjoy the rest of your afternoon and enjoy the long weekend that's coming up. And yeah, please connect with David and ask all your questions. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you soon.
Yes, indeed.